against the light of Vineyard. We continue on in our recordings, but we are excited that in just 2 weeks we're going to be starting live services and continuing with our recordings as well to give people many options. We're going to start with worship. Would you just join me in prayer? As always, I encourage you to stand or engage your body, just however you best can help focus. And just let's give this time to the Lord. Father, I thank you that you are here, even now, in the midst of all of this, the hard and the easy, the joyful and the sad. Would you just purify our hearts, God, that we would make a beautiful offering to you by our lives. Come and do something great with our humble pieces of clay. Amen.
In the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. Make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. Gave me with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you and to your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. Make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. Lay down carry your new fire today. Sing it again. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. Lay down my old flames, carry your new fire today. Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Your glory dwells. Wanna see your kingdom move through us. We long to know your power here on earth right now. We do.
May we be a place your glory dwells, reaching out to heal the sick and feed the hungry, setting every captive free with your love and hope.
Come, Lord, and fill us up. Come, Lord, and move in power.
Let us be your hands and your feet.
We wanna be a place your glory dwells. I long to be a place your glory dwells. May we be a place. May we be a place your glory dwells. See your kingdom move through us. Oh, we long to know your power here on earth right now.
May we be a place your glory dwells, reaching out to heal the sick and feed the hungry, setting every captive free with your love and
Come, Lord, and fill us up. Come, Lord, and move in power. Let us be your hands and your feet. We wanna be a place your glory dwells. I long to be a place your glory dwells. Stirring, stirring, you are stirring. Moving, moving, you are moving. Stirring, stirring, you are stirring. All your gifts in me. Stirring, stirring, you are stirring. Moving, moving, you are moving. Stirring, stirring, you are stirring. All your gifts in me. Again. You're stirring, stirring, you are stirring. Moving, moving, you are moving. Stirring, stirring, you are stirring. All your gifts in me. Come, Lord, and fill us up. Come, Lord, and move in power. Let us be your hands and your feet. We want to be a place your glory dwells. I want to be a place your glory dwells. I want to be a place your glory dwells. I want to be a place your glory dwells.
We can count on your faithfulness, God. Just like we know the sun's going to rise every morning, the waves are going to reach the shore. You are faithful. It is who you are. Help us just to rest in your sureness today.
Sure as the waves will reach the shore, sure as the sun paints the morning skies, sure as the sunset gives way to evening stars, moonlight bathes the earth in gentle light. You're the anchor that's holding me. I'm sure of your faithfulness. I'm sure you will never change, my Lord. You won't give up on me. Sure as my life. Sure as my life is in your hands. Sure as your sacrifice to set me free. When all is shaking, Lord, your love stands firm. Your spirit calms my heart and
faithfulness. I'm sure you will never change, my Lord. You won't give up on me. Oh, I'm sure of your faithfulness. I'm sure you will never change, my Lord. You won't give up on me. You won't give up on me.
Hey, Salida Vineyard. So it's my privilege today to give the message. Jason's on a much-needed vacation. It's been a long few months of this COVID-19 season. Before I jump into my message today, I just have one announcement, and it's just a reminder to our church family to send us photos of yourself, either when you're listening to our church services or any other time. We just miss the faces of our church, and we wanted to do a photo collage montage before we started back to our live services. So the deadline is next weekend, Sunday, June 21st. If you could email that to our office account at office@salidavineyard.org, or you can message it to our Facebook account as well, so we can compile those photos and just get to see all of your faces together and sort of celebrate that we've made it through that first season of being underground. So I am continuing on in the story today, the Story Bible, that Jason has been beginning. And we're still early on. If you haven't gotten your copy of the Story Bible, we will have those at church when we start back live the 28th. Otherwise, you can always email our office account and we can figure out a way to get you a copy. That's $10. But we are continuing on, and it's just a 10-week sermon series, so we are going to be skipping a couple of chapters. So last week was chapter 1, most of the book of Genesis. Now I only have chapters 37 through 50 of Genesis, but it's just one small chapter, chapter 3 in our storybook Bible. And it's about Joseph, a tale that probably many of you are quite familiar with. But I am going to tell his story in my own words just to refresh your memory and maybe bring out some things you haven't thought about since you've probably last heard this in Sunday school. And then we're going to come back and tie in the themes of Jesus and our own story and universal journey through Joseph's story. So, have you ever met anyone who thinks they're God's gift to the world and not necessarily in the best way? Well, Joseph, as a teenager, was probably one of those people. See, he literally had the dreams to prove that he was God's gift to the world. As a teenager, he had prophetic dreams that showed that he was going to be ruling over his brothers. His brothers were going to be bowing down to him. He had many brothers, and he was one of the younger ones. But that didn't make his brothers real appreciative of him. They were already jealous of him, and because of his father, Jacob, who had a problem with favoritism. He definitely saw Joseph as his favorite son, who was the son of his favorite wife, Rachel, even though he had other wives and mothers of his children. And the other brothers didn't appreciate that because they would like to get on the good graces of their father, but he was stubbornly preferring his son Joseph. And to make matters worse, he made him an ornate coat, and it was very fancy. There's many different translations of what perhaps that was like, but it seems to signify that he was intended for leadership, that this was a special coat that was real fancy and would have taken a lot of work to make, and that probably means that his father saw him as ruling the family clan at some point, and that he was intended for better work than just being a shepherd, which is what their brothers did, is they tended sheep. You wouldn't put on your nicest clothes and then go out and tend sheep. And so this was kind of to show, perhaps, that he was meant for better, higher, more royal work. The brothers really didn't appreciate that. Then he had these dreams and said, listen to these dreams I had. You're going to be bowing down to me. And they really weren't up for that. So one day Joseph goes to check up on his brothers. They're tending sheep out in the rural area, countryside. And they say, here comes that dreamer. Let's take care of that guy. Maybe Father will love us better if his favorite son is gone. They beat him up, throw him down a well. Then they feel a little bad about that. So they say, well, let's maybe get some money for this and not kill him all the way, but just sell him. So a nearby caravan is going by on its way to Egypt. So they sell him for pieces of silver. And they take his ornate coat, dip it in animal's blood, and use it as evidence to prove to their father that he's been gored by a wild animal. And that's the end of Joseph. This is at age 17 that Joseph is betrayed by his brothers. We know that this isn't the end of his story, though, not by a long shot. So he is sold in Egypt to Potiphar, the captain of the guard. But while he's there working for Potiphar, he is blessed in all he does. It says the Lord was with him, so he prospered. The Lord gave him success in everything he did. So Joseph gets more and more responsibility, and everything eventually gets put in his charge under Potiphar. And everything that he puts his hand to and the whole household is blessed by the Lord because of Joseph. Unfortunately, then Potiphar's wife accuses him, tries to seduce him. Joseph doesn't want anything to do with it. And so then she wrongly accuses him and says, he tried to seduce me. And Potiphar's not a big fan of that. Joseph gets thrown in prison for not doing anything wrong. But then, again, the similar thing happens. Under the prison warden, he's with the king's prisoners. He's blessed in all he does again. And he eventually gets put in charge of the other prisoners, and whatever responsibilities there are, the prison warden gives to him and doesn't even worry about what's going on in the prison because Joseph is doing so well, stewarding and leading and taking care of everything. And it says that, again, he's blessed in all he does, and that the Lord grants him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. You can imagine at this point, though, you're still in prison, that his prophetic dreams as a teenager seem pretty far away at this point. He doesn't even know if they're going to come true. Were those really from God? I can imagine there may have been some doubting going on. But another opportunity for dreams and interpreting them comes up. Other king's prisoners are in the prison there with him, the cupbearer and the baker, and they have prophetic dreams of their own. And they are troubled. Joseph says, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. So they do, and he correctly interprets them, and one gets executed, and one rises to his former glory as the cupbearer for Pharaoh, for the king. And Joseph says, hey, by the way, don't forget me. I'm here in prison. And by the way, it's for something I didn't even do. Remember me. Put in a good word for me. Help me get out of there. But the account tells us that it's 2 more years that he's in prison. The cupbearer does not remember Joseph. And then Pharaoh himself has a dream. This is another opportunity for an interpretation. And then the cupbearer suddenly remembers, oh yeah, the guy who got me my job back is really good at interpreting dreams. We should probably get him up here. So Pharaoh brings him up, and Joseph correctly interprets the dream and says, I cannot do this interpretation, but God will give Pharaoh the interpretation he desires, and rightly says that there's a famine coming. These sickly cows swallowing up fat cows, very strange dreams, mean that there's 7 years of plenty coming and then 7 years of really bad famine coming. And Joseph recommends to Pharaoh that he put someone in charge in order to plan for all of that and make sure that you don't go hungry in these years of famine, since they know there's years of plenty coming first. Pharaoh's like, great, you sound like the guy for the job. And so Joseph is promoted at the age of 30 to Pharaoh's right-hand man. And all this practicing that he's been doing is fully put into realization. He is left in charge of everything. Pharaoh doesn't concern himself with anything. It's all in Joseph's care. And his administrative and stewardship gifts certainly help everyone within Egypt and beyond, because we're told that the famine lasts not just in Egypt, but in the lands outside of it as well. So Egypt is planning. There's 7 years of famine, 7 years of plenty. And then 2 years of famine, and people are starting to really feel it because they didn't plan. Well, Egypt is ready because Joseph goes into all of Egypt and has been going into all the cities and storing up food so much that he even loses count. There's so much extra grain. But 2 years into this famine, who should also come into Egypt looking for food but Joseph's brothers? They live in a land beyond Egypt called Canaan. And they're hungry. Notice here that God's promise of blessing to Abraham and in the previous chapters of Genesis is in danger if Israel's family, that is Jacob and his 12 sons, who become the 12 tribes of Israel, his story of blessing to bless the whole world through Abraham and through Jacob's family is in danger if they all die of starvation. This could just be like, the end of Genesis and that's it. You don't have the rest of the Bible because the people of Israel have died of starvation. So Joseph plays, of course, an incredibly important role. They come to him looking for food. Joseph is certainly tempted to be mean to them and get back at them. There's some trickery that happens. He keeps one of the brothers in prison while they go and get his youngest full brother, Benjamin, also the son of Rachel, to finally come back. But in the end, he only blesses his brothers, gives them plenty of provision. And as they're talking, they don't recognize Joseph because he's using an interpreter. He's not using the Hebrew language. He's probably also dressed up, in all the Egyptian newfangled clothes, right? But he knows them. And finally, he can't take it anymore. He's extremely emotional about seeing his brothers. And he finally says, "I am Joseph. Do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, but God." That's quite the perspective. So Joseph moves his whole family to Egypt in order to continue to better care for them and protect them during the 5 more years of famine. And we're told that his father Jacob lives another 17 years in Egypt. And after Jacob dies, we're told that the brothers get scared again and go, "Oh shoot, maybe he hasn't really forgiven us. Maybe he's going to mess with us now that his beloved father is dead." They send him a letter and say, "Hey, you have to forgive us. It was our father's dying wish." And Joseph could have messed with them again, but he didn't. And he said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." And at the end of Jacob's life, he had prophesied over his 12 sons. They become the 12 tribes of Israel. And the story really is about the line of Jacob and how God would bless the world through him, but not in the ways that we might expect. What a story, right? I don't think you could write a better movie plot. All the twists and deceptions and all there's just a lot, the redemption, the forgiveness that goes on. It's just incredible. I've loved reading through these stories this way. Where do we see Jesus here? So Joseph himself is a character type of Christ. He foreshadows Christ in the whole of himself. He is wrongly accused and stays pure. He is betrayed even for silver. We're told that Judas is paid silver for betraying Jesus. And so the brothers get silver when they betray Joseph. And of course, literally, Joseph saves all of Israel through his death, meaning they thought he was dead, but really he was sold into slavery in Egypt. But Jesus does truly die and come back to life and saves all of Israel and all the whole world through his death. Innocent, that is. There's also some subversion of Jacob's favoritism. I was thinking about how Joseph, of his 12 brothers, obviously has the most growth and character of all his brothers. Like, he's the one who really chooses to follow God and be shaped by him. But if you notice, the line of Jesus does not come from Joseph. It actually comes from Judah, who is not the firstborn. And Judah was one of the sons of Leah, the wife who was not loved by Jacob. I just thought that was an interesting side point, that you would think, okay, all the best sons of the line are going to have the line of Jesus through them. But I think that might have more to do with glory for Leah in the long run over Rachel, because Leah was scorned over that favoritism, and it subverts what Jacob's favoritism, which was not a good thing. And then one theme that's perhaps less obvious is this kingdom ruling through theme. A commentator I was reading, they say that this is the first time that it comes up in Genesis, we're 50 chapters in basically, saying that every time Joseph rises in responsibility and leadership, someone is ruling through him. So under Potiphar, and then under the prison warden, and then again under Pharaoh himself. Someone is leaving all of their responsibility and authority and choosing to rule through Joseph. And this is actually a theme that is a way that God chooses to work. When Jesus walks the earth, God chooses to reign his kingdom through Jesus. And then this connects to our story because Jesus wants to rule through us with his authority. That is primarily how God chooses to work. He uses people to enact his authority and will on the earth. And this is the first story that really shows that leaving responsibility and using a person to enact God's will on the world. But notice that this kingdom ruling is not always so triumphant. Jesus and Joseph have to suffer before they rise to glory. And I just think it's a good reminder to us. Is that our kind of victory? Is that our kind of ruling, the one that has the path of humbling and suffering? Not easy, but God uses it for glory. And where do we see our story here? One that I thought was really encouraging is that I think it shows that practical gifts or maybe boring gifts are also blessed and given by God. So yes, Joseph interprets dreams, and that's perhaps a more prophetic or fancy kind of skill or blessing that God gives Joseph. But there's a lot of administrative gifting here. There's accounting. There's higher math. He literally had to do all of this accounting without calculators, without computers. He did a lot of stewarding of other people's gifts. And I think this is just really encouraging to me because I'm the worship pastor here at the church. And a couple years ago when Jason came to be our pastor, he had several leaders take a leadership strengths and giftings test. And you would think that mine, number one would be music or creativity or something like that. No, when I took the test, my number one gifting is stewardship. Yippee. If you need someone to be frugal with money, that's me. And maybe that sounds really boring, but man, is it useful. It may not be the showiest of the gifts, but it's useful. Notice that God here in this story seems kind of behind the scenes a little bit. He's sort of running the puppets a little bit. God is present, but he does not show up, and he's never quoted in this story. There are no big angels or sudden miracles that happen in order to fix this famine. It is through Joseph's faithful stewardship that the whole known world basically doesn't die of famine. And Joseph probably had natural leadership and administrative gifts, but we're told, because there's many chapters of this story, that it took from age 17, when he's betrayed, to age 30, which is 13 years, before he uses his gifts full on. But I certainly think there was some practice involved, not just blessing by God, but also practice. He got to practice being in charge of things for Potiphar. He got to practice being in charge of things for the prison warden and then to Pharaoh. I don't think that was on accident either. Before he was in charge of a lot, he was in charge of a little. Another place we see our story is that God wants our utter dependence. One commentator believes that Joseph's dream interpretations change over time, and that shows how he is growing in maturity and dependence on God. When he's in his teenage years, notice all his dream prophecies and interpretations come true. They're true. But the way that he presents them changes. The first time he just says to his brothers, "Listen to this dream I had," and doesn't maybe couch that in the most gracious language, knowing that his brothers are super jealous of him. And then later on, he's in prison, and the cupbearer and the baker come to him, and Joseph says, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." So maybe acknowledging God's role, but being like, look, I can do this. I know how to interpret dreams. And then when Pharaoh asks him, he completely negates his role in it and basically says, I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. There is many years it's easy to miss because we read this chapter in 15 minutes, but there's years in between each of these interpretations. And it is Joseph's dependence on God working in him that is honored, rather than our arrogance that maybe masquerades as faith sometimes. It's easy to say, like, look, I'm great and God's helping me. It's a whole other thing to say, I have no idea if I could ever do this, but I know that God is faithful. Another point is that we all have prison chapters, one, plural, probably many, in our life. There's a universal journey, which is one of the themes that Jason brought up when he was talking about the repeatable themes in the story. We all have a prison chapter, but the promise is that God is still with us in that. He didn't leave Joseph in the prison. And in fact, because Joseph was faithful to God in each of those seasons, God was able to use him, and it put him in the right place. You would think the prison wouldn't be the right place for God to use him, but that's where he was glorified up from. But notice that God did test and mature Joseph before his dreams came true. It is way more fun to talk about, God gave me this magical gifting and I got to use it right away and it changed the whole world. Usually, we are not instant heroes. Usually, there is maturing and testing and humbling and waiting that happens first. Psalm 105 brings this up. Psalm 105 is a chapter that poetically retells the story of Israel early on. As you're reading through the story, I actually encourage you to go to Psalm 105 and read through it there. And it talks about Joseph. 18 and 19 says, "They bruised his feet with shackles. His neck was put in irons." He's in prison. "Till what he foretold came to pass, till the word of the Lord proved him true." That's what the NIV says. And the NLT version says, "Until there came time to fulfill his dreams, the Lord tested Joseph's character. Refined, smelted, like silver." That's the word there. He is tested and purified to find out his true character. It reminded me of a quote by Friedrich Nietzsche that says, "The essential thing in heaven and earth is that there should be a long obedience in the same direction. There results and has always resulted in the long run something which has made life worth living." Or put another way, Phil Strout, the director of Vineyard USA, put it, "The kingdom is a slow cooker, not a microwave." That's not very fun, but it's often true. Joseph didn't just suddenly rise to power under Pharaoh. There was a long obedience in the same direction of finally allowing God to humble and test him and to use his gifts and to be faithful of stewarding other people's households. He could have never imagined he would finally steward Pharaoh's entire Egypt. It turns out that Joseph was God's gift to the world, the long way around. And my encouragement to us is that we would be patient with God's way. And the final point that I have about our story connecting to Joseph is that we need God's perspective on the hard parts in our story. And I think it's incredible that Joseph shows such perspective on his own in the midst of his life, not at the very end, but throughout it. So he's 30 when he rises to power. There's 7 years of plenty and 2 years into famine. So he had to have been at least 39 when his brothers show up asking for food. And when he says, "I'm Joseph," and he said, "It's okay. This was God who did this, to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance." That's quite the perspective to have. He knows at that point, like, I'm in Egypt to save my family's life. And then at the end, after Jacob dies, 17 plus more years later, the brothers are like, you got to forgive us. And he says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. I'm sure that handing out food year after year and opening those storehouses and being able to feed the whole known world probably gave Joseph some perspective on, holy cow, I could only do this because God prepared me to do it. Many lives were saved. So I think that we do not always know why, for sure, about the hard parts of our lives. But we can ask God to show us where he is in the midst of us. He is with us in the prison chapters. He is with us at all points. And he loves to show us where he is right now. And he can show us his goodness. We know that he is working things for good. We can become long view Christians and know that God is shaping all of us in the midst of all of those hard things. I was trying to think of an example for myself of having perspective on the hard parts of life. And I think part of it is I'm still kind of young, so maybe I don't have a ton of perspective. My oldest kid is only 3. I will learn a lot more when she's a teenager and when she leaves the house on what it is I'm doing as a parent and whether any of it is any good. But I also know that it's not an accident that God placed me to be a pastor in the church at 30. It wasn't even on like my life goals list, but here I am. And looking back, I haven't been given betrayal by my family. I haven't been falsely accused very often. But in the small things that God has given me, I've chosen to be faithful most of the time. And I think God uses those small, faithful steps and puts us in a place where we are most able to be used by him. So, in summary, Jesus wants to rule through you, even if that maybe seems like boring ways. It's not boring. It's all from God. And does God seem subtle or slow or too big to possibly comprehend? Let's have faith that God is at work, even when we don't understand. And just because we have gifts and dreams doesn't mean that their timing is right now. And it doesn't mean that their best use is right now. But it does mean that we should be obedient with them in a long direction, in the little things and the big things. And if you struggle with your prison chapters, whatever those may be, ask God to show you where he is in them. And ask him what he might be using for good through them. Let me pray for us, and then I will end us with the priestly blessing that Jason has been ending each of these messages with. Lord, I just thank you for these stories. How Joseph's story shows us Jesus and shows us ourselves. I am amazed that you choose to rule through us. And God, if we just feel that we have non-spiritual gifts or we have a really boring road, would you show us how all gifting comes from you? And you can be hard to see in our story, but would you give us eyes and faith to see you and to give you credit that you are more at work than we ever know? Help us to be long view Christians. Help us to have a long obedience in the same direction. Patient with your ways, patient with your timing. God, we all have hard parts of our story, and we often have people we need to forgive from those hard parts. Would you give us your perspective? Would you show us your presence? Would you show us your goodness through those things? Amen. Numbers 6:23 through 27. This is the New Living Translation. And let's remember that this blessing is already true for us who are in Jesus. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace.